he seemed unsinkable. The old man held on, outliving all his competitors and rock and roll partners. But even Jerry Lee Lewis didn't last forever. With his utterly hooligan piano playing, passionate vocals and irreverent behavior, he lived up to the ironic nickname of the Killer and laid the foundations for the music we love. Jerry Lee was born in Louisiana in 1935 to a family of poor farmers who mortgaged their home to buy their son his first piano. He was kicked out of an evangelical school for singing boogie-woogie church hymns. Barely out of his teens, Lewis began sneaking into a bar called Haney's Big House in Faraday. Blues musicians played there regularly, and Lewis watched like a mesmerized man. Lewis's parents knew that for their son to succeed, they needed to visit the big producers in Memphis. To finance the trip from Louisiana to Memphis, Lewis's father sold 33 dozen eggs along the way. When they finally arrived, Lewis met Sun Records producer Sam Phillips, who gave him a chance to make a record. But his big debut turned out to be a miserable failure. His first release completely flopped and went nowhere. However, the second Whole Lotta Shakin' Going On clearly had a bit more success and is now considered a rock and roll classic. The single Whole Lotta Shakin' Going On was a big breakthrough for Jerry Lee Lewis and the music industry in general. The energetic blonde-haired rascal didn't follow any rules, playing standing up, tapping his foot on the keyboard and singing with his trademark smirk, "Kiss Me, Baby. It Feels So Good." This song was followed by their biggest success, Great Balls of Fire, which went to number 2 in the US. The expression Great Balls of Fire can have many interpretations, and the more obscene they are, the more accurate. Of all the stars of early rock, Jerry Lee Lewis was by far the most radical and out of control. A natural punk. He introduced Elvis and Johnny Cash to illegal substances. His wild and unbridled temperament was what made Jerry Lee's performances so exciting and unpredictable. The musician first tied himself in marriage at the age of 14. His first marriage was to 17-year-old Dorothy Barton. His second marriage was to Jane Mitch. But family life turned out to be literally hell. The couple was always scandalized. Clarified relations, the musician raised his hand on his wife. Years later, he admitted, all that happened provoked his numerous cheating. For the third time, the musician tied himself with the bonds of marriage with 13-year-old cousin Myra Gayla Brown. Reporters learnt about the unusual union quite by accident. One day the musician appeared in the company of a young beauty. He was asked about the charming companion. Lewis did not refuse and confessed everything. Marriage to his young wife hit the musician's career hard. His hits disappeared from the radio for a long time, and labels no longer wanted to get in touch with him. But the third marriage did not last long either. The couple had 2 children. But the musician realized, to return to the stage he needed to change the image of a young wife in love with a spectacular macho. Divorce was imminent. It was the separation that helped the celebrity to regain his former popularity. Forced to perform in small clubs for a few $100s a night, Lewis found salvation in country music. He recorded a series of hits and had a good career in his new role. Today, many of his country-style pieces, such as Another Place, Another Time, for example, are considered some of his best work. In the early 80s, the musician began to suffer from stomach pains. But instead of going to the doctor, he was his own doctor. He injected himself in the stomach with painkillers. He practically stopped sleeping, continuing to party in his mansion, and in the morning he was again tormented by terrible attacks and took his anger out on the women he could get his hands on. After a while, the pain intensified and it was no longer possible without the help of doctors. After the walls of his stomach ruptured, he was taken to hospital. During the operation a strong hemorrhage opened up, which could have ended in death. But everything passed. After leaving the hospital, he returned to his usual way of life. His health lasted only 4 years. In 1985, doctors cut out almost half of his stomach to remove the ulcers that had opened. The odds of salvation and death were stacked against him. But Lewis pulled through again. In 1980, along with his deteriorating health, the musician went through another divorce. After 9 years of marriage, his beloved Sharon Elizabeth Pate accused him of violence and filed a lawsuit in court. And when the woman asked him for money for herself and the child, she heard a terrible thing. The musician threatened to leave him alone, otherwise she would end her life at the bottom of a lake near some farm. Those words in a sense turned out to be prophetic. On the 8th of June 1982, the body of the ex-spouse found in the pool. She drowned. It was shortly before a crucial court hearing on the division of property. It was said that the nickname Killer was attached to the musician because of the stunning effect that the young virtuoso produced on the audience with his talent. But in fact there was nothing secret or unusual about it. In post-war Louisiana, Killer was a slang address. Hey, you killer. And Louis loved it and used it more often than anyone else in the company. It ended up being his prophetic nickname. He never lived up to his middle name, but it had its prerequisites. The fifth spouse of the musician became a waitress from a fashionable nightclub in Michigan, a petite blonde Shawn Michelle Stevens. But soon love turned into quarrels, squabbles, scandals and unceasing jealousy. The 22nd of August 1983, a frightened wife called her mother and said that she intended to leave her husband. Later it turned out that night Shawn also dialed Scott's sister, a guy she had met in Michigan. She begged to meet him at the musician's concert on the 28th of August and asked if the man still had feelings for her. Suddenly, the conversation broke off in the middle of a sentence. Shawn disappeared and never called back. A couple of hours later her body was found on the bed. Although many facts caused and investigators' suspicion of Louis's involvement in the death of his wife, he never became the main suspect. The official cause of death was said to be a drug overdose. It was allegedly prescribed to the musician, and the woman, having lost touch with reality, swallowed the pills. And yet, Jerry Lee Lewis has survived fashion changes, family dramas, and frightening diagnoses. He's recorded 40 albums, remaining a lump from another era, rising above the usual hustle and bustle. Shortly before his death, the musician was no longer concerned about problems with women, he was thinking about heaven and hell, what awaits him after death. Louis was the epitome of lust and satisfaction, with his carnivorous tenor and demanding intonations, frenetic tempos and cheeky glissandi, cocky grin and crazy blonde hair. He was a loner who made fans scream and keyboardists swear. His live show was so incendiary that during a performance of Whole Lotta Shakin' Goin' On in 1957 on the Steve Allen Show, chairs were thrown at him like buckets of water in hell. Louis was notorious among his peers for his licentious lifestyle and violent temper. He was an innovator when it came to stage performances, playing the keyboard with his feet, or even playing on a burning piano. Louis's superstar status was confirmed by his participation in the $1 Million Quartet, an improvised supergroup that also included Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins. Judith, his seventh wife, was by his side as he passed away at his home in Mississippi, south of Memphis. In his last days, he told his wife that he welcomed the afterlife and feared nothing. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel to not miss new episodes of the podcast. And also you can become a sponsor of the channel. All the funds received will go to the development of the channel.